the sign at release so you have an emotional support need for 3 chickens, and then you have enough chickens to get eggs for your family.
Well, that's the way we got around meat wrapping, because it's not considered a farm animal and it's not
Yeah.
domesticated. So there was no rules.
And it just depends on who is the city near me. It always depends on who is the one enforcing the rules. The first guy was like, if it's your 4-H bunny, we're not going to. If it's your kid's 4-H bunny, we don't care. Well, if you're raising 100 of them, now we care. So, but this guy is like, you have one. How dare you?
In our town, you can have 4 chickens as long as no one complains. But if your neighbors complain, then they can come to you and say, your chickens are too noisy, you need to get rid of them. So we're schmoozing all our neighbors by giving them a dozen eggs randomly.
Yes.
So here's the benefit of me having my chickens. If they get 3 eggs, then they can complain about it.
Okay, I know what I need to do. Sarah, do you have a piece of paper? Because I wanted to write those dates down that I
Sure.
because I always misquote them by like 100 years. It's like if I
What
write
I
down
don't have is pen.
I'll find one.
My purse in my car.
Problem number 2, where did I set my phone down? Oh, I gave it to her. Courtney, I need my phone back. I'll get you when it starts. I'll just put it on vibrate. No, we can turn it off.
Do you need me for anything, or are you good?
No, I want to write my dates down because I think when I misquoted it.
Do you need me for anything? You good?
I'm all good. Thank you.
I love your glasses match.
I can't, you know what's, I've got them on, I can't see you. But if I don't wear them, I can't see close. So I'm constantly doing this. I knew it was you though by your voice. Ooh. Yeah, where's that white container? We saw that. We saw that white container of chicken was there.
I didn't bring the whole bucket over. I just brought a packet.
We're gonna double this up. All right, the ovens are on. I know it's hot in here, but the ovens are on. It's gonna get hotter. What's that? Is this a new one for me? No. Oh, this one I've been canning for ever. Yeah. Yeah, this is a oldie but a goodie. Yeah. I think that's right. We might even have Ziplocs. think we'll start, eh? Where's my partner? Where'd she go? Well, it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to get started. Yeah, it's hot in here. We got other things to do today. Tammy's around here. There she is. So I'm just going to introduce us real quick, and then we're gonna jump right into canning. So this is Tammy from Rebel Canners, and I am yes, and I'm Sarah, otherwise known as Peelies and Petals, Sarah Plain and Tall, the Crazy Canning Lady, Mom. A lot of different names there. So Tammy and I are here today to help share with you our journey in canning, show you some new recipes, talk about our upbringing a little bit, and so you can get an idea of how you can apply this to your life, and then leave lots of ample time for you guys to ask those questions that you always want to ask, and you just don't have anybody to ask them to, or you can't find the answers on the old Google. So I'm going to let Tammy introduce herself a little bit here, and then we'll start canning.
I was asked to start a group on Facebook where people could feel safe asking their canning questions and not get shut out, booted out of the Facebook group, or totally banned, or called all sorts of unchristian names just for asking a question. You know, that's how I learn, is asking questions, and I wanted a safe place for people to be able to ask a question about canning, because that's how I feel everybody learns. And so I started that. I got tired of saying the same thing over and over again. So I started a YouTube channel thinking, oh, I'll just post this video in my Facebook group and people will go and watch the video and I don't have to say it over and over again. Not true. The Facebook group crowd is 150K over here, and I have 10+K in the YouTube group, and there's only about 12 people that love me enough to watch me on both platforms. So, but I have been canning for more years than I want to admit to, on a taped live recording. But I started canning with my parents and my grandmother and my aunts and uncles. And my grandmother learned from her grandmother, not her mother. And so I have about 5 generations of canning experience behind me that I really want to share, because I think right now is the buddy to have this skill. No matter if you're the 5-year-old just starting to learn with your family or you're 95, it's really important right now in our world culture to have this skill. And I want to be able to have all of you today ask any question you want and feel safe asking a question.
Thank you, Tammy. And I'm Sarah. Oh, yes, let's clap. Yes.
She's Sarah, clap.
I'm Sarah, yes, let's clap for Tammy. And so I have a very similar background. Tammy and I were kind of raised in the Midwest around the same time. I'm from a long, long generational line of canners. We've got some recipes in my family dating back to the 1800s, so I know for sure there was a lot going on a couple hundred years ago with my family in canning. I most recently remember canning with my grandmothers and my mother, but it definitely goes back a lot further than that. I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, about, 12, 13 hours north of here. If you're Canadian, hey, you're more southern than I am. Very, very cold up there. We have a very short grow season up there, about 130 days. Our last snow pile last year was June 7th. Let that sink in. June 7th, we still had snow. So our grow season's really short, and so canning is really, really important to us, and it's the way that we sustain ourselves through the winter when we can't grow anything or when growing really slows down. So that's why I'm very passionate about it as well.
Or when the snow is too deep for her to go to the grocery store.
Right, yes. We do that a lot as well. We don't go to the grocery store a lot in the winter, for sure. I have 5 children, a grandbaby. I know what you're going to say. Yes, I promise you, I am not lying about that. And I have recently created this canning book for you guys. And so if you have that book with you today, we're going to start on page 99. I say bruschetta in a jar. I've been corrected 100 times that it's bruschetta. However, I'm a Uber, and we don't say anything correctly. So bruschetta in a jar, which is basically like a pickled tomato with a lot of different spices in it. And we're going to talk a little bit about water bath canning and when it's appropriate to use the water bath canner as I'm canning the recipe. There will be a couple sections where I'll say, okay, let's ask questions about this. If you have any questions about this, if not, we're going to move on to the next section. I realize that it's very hot outside and the sun is beating down and all these things. Please, please, please take good care of yourselves. Sit there and drink water. Get up and use the restrooms as needed. Take breaks. Let's all stay healthy throughout the whole day so we can learn as much as possible while we're here. Okay? Anything else?
Nope,
Okay, Tammy's going to be up next with the dairy, and we're going to kind of switch back and forth. Also, I'm going to be drinking a lot in between. So we're going to start with the bruschetta in a jar, which is a water bath canning recipe. Let me get a good feel for the room. Who in here does any canning at all? Okay, a lot of you already can. Who does water bath canning? And who does pressure canning? And who has never canned anything a day in their life and want to learn? Yes. Yes. Clap for the newbies. So our job here today is to make sure that you have a safe environment to learn in and ask your questions. We're going to answer those to the best of our ability. Please remember that throughout all of these classes, everything is a your kitchen, your rules. Do you understand what that means? If you do, raise your right hand and say, I understand. That means we're going to tell you what we do in our kitchens. We're going to tell you what works for our family. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you need to do your own research. You need to find trusted sources. You need to dig. You need to make sure that you're feeding your family the most healthy, nutritious, safest food that you possibly can. And you need to do that by gathering more education than just 2 people. Okay? Water bath canning. When is it appropriate to water bath can? Anybody know what types of foods we can use in a water bath canner? What types of foods? Fruits? I'm sorry? High acid foods. I heard tomatoes. Anybody else? Yep. We're calling out pH numbers. How about pickles? Pickles is a big one. And anything pickled. All right, so it doesn't just include your pickles, like your cucumber pickles or your bread and butter pickles, Jerkins pickles. It also includes any of your vegetables that you're going to pickle. So we're looking at our high acid foods. And while I'm talking and explaining water bath canning, if you want to follow along with the recipe, I'm going to start filling these jars so we keep everything moving. All right, so water bath canning for high acid foods. That's your fruits, jams, jellies, tomatoes with or without tomato or lemon juice. We'll talk about that in a second. And pickling vegetables in a pickling brine or a high acid brine. Now, water bath canning works by boiling our food to 212 degrees and then holding that for a predetermined amount of time. So 2 things that you have to hit in water bath canning: time and temperature. Time and temperature. Did anybody have a teacher in school that said, all right, your grade is going to be calculated on 2 scales, your attendance and how well you do on the test? And you have to hit those 2 things. So if you're a 100% A student and you get A's on every single test, but you only come to class once a week, you can't pass, right? So, and that's kind of what canning is. You have to hit those 2 benchmarks. You have to get the good grade and you have to be there all the time. If one of those falls below, if the time falls below, if the temperature falls below, then we're going to say, that food, don't eat it. It's not safe. Don't eat that. All right? If you go above, say you process something a little bit too long or a little bit too hot, is it going to be okay? Yes. You're going to be okay with above and over. We just have to hit those benchmarks. And I'm going to go back and forth here. So what I have in here is pint jars, and I've got them heated up. So does anybody know why we heat our jars? Thermal shock. Has anybody ever heard of sterilization? Okay, so this is actually a misnomer that is used in the canning community a lot. A lot of our older generation canners, which I consider myself one, we sometimes say, oh, you need to sterilize all of that, but we're not actually sterilizing. What we're doing is we're sanitizing. There's no way to sterilize your jars, your lids, your rings. There's no way to do that in a home kitchen, because the minute they come out of the canner, what happens? They hit the air. The air has microbes, and you no longer have anything that is sterilized. So we can't do that in our home kitchens. But what we want to do is heat them to prevent thermal shock. So hot jars, hot food, hot canner. Room temperature jars, room temperature food, room temperature canner. We want to make sure that all 3 of those things are matching all the time. Even if you think you're not thermal shocking your jars, over time, anybody ever have a jar bottom blow out? Lose all your food, the jar just cracks and breaks on the bottom, and there it goes. Those are typically caused from thermal shock, or you might get a crack in the jar, or sometimes the lid won't seal because there's a crack around the rim. So This prevents that. It also helps to clean and sanitize. So what should you use to clean and sanitize your jars before warming them? Dishwasher's good. Hand wash, hot soapy water, rinse, any of those are acceptable. So I've got some hot jars here, and I'm going to start pulling those out, and we're going to start adding the tomatoes and all of the spices. What's that? Oh, I thought you were asking a question. Sorry. Yep. Cherry tomatoes are a very prolific crop, and they're wonderful because once they take off, with a recipe like this, you can stick these in a Ziploc bag in your freezer, and then when you're ready to can them up, you just pull them out, stick them in the jars, and start canning. Yes. So a water bath canner works by completely submerging the jars in water. Very different than pressure canning. So to completely submerge the jars in water, we need 1 to 2 inches of water above the canning lids. 1 to 2 inches. So there's water in here. I've got some water in the jars heating those. And then she asked, is there a trivet in here? There is. And if you don't have a trivet, you can use a dish towel. That works just the same. The idea is that we are getting the jars up off the bottom of the canner so we get nice equal heating and boiling underneath the underside of the jar. Now this recipe makes, who's following along in their book? Anybody? This makes approximately 5 to 6 pint jars, and I'm going to try to double that because I got a lot of tomatoes. So I'm going to go spices, tomatoes, and get all these jars filled up, and then we'll make our brine.
Have you ever had issues with using yellow cherry tomatoes?
No. I often use rainbow cherry tomatoes for this recipe, the ones that have like the purple and the yellow and all those in them. And they are actually a lot more fun to look at when they're all rainbow colored. I'm sorry? Yes. I'm going to use 4 cups of water times 2 because I'm doubling this recipe. So she asked if you could use it in half pints. You can always adjust a recipe larger or smaller than what you need. And the way that works is if you are moving up one size, you change the time, the processing time that it needs to be done. So how you do that is you use your canning books. And your canning books will have time and temperature charts in them that will tell you how to move up or down on a recipe if you're going to run pints or quarts. In my canning book, it's the very last sentence of I put it on every single recipe. So you don't have to flip back and forth to the charts. It's on every single recipe. So this recipe, if you're doing pints, it's 10 minutes. If you're doing quarts, it's 15 minutes. Now, if you're doing something smaller than a pint, it stays at the pint time. Yep, so if it's an in-between size, this is 2 cups of white vinegar. If it goes to an in-between size, like a pint and a half size, you would process it for quarts. It has to go up because that jar's at an in-between size and you can't process it for the smaller time and the smaller jar. It needs to go to the bigger jar in order for it to get properly heated all the way through. Yeah, you're welcome. That was white vinegar. What makes this what I call bruschetta is the balsamic vinegar. And so we're going to use 1 cup of this. And you see I'm using my pint jars. You can use actually measuring cups if you want. I've been doing this quite a while, so I'm pretty good at eyeballing. Okay, sometimes we eat this out of the jar, not gonna lie. I will sit with a fork and just gorge myself. But if you want to actually use it for something, you can take any type of toast that you like, add some cheese on it, mash this up with a fork a little bit. It comes out pretty soft. Mash it with a fork, lay it on the toast, drizzle with olive oil or a balsamic glaze, stick that in the broiler for like 5 minutes, and you have bruschetta, like a warmed bruschetta. I also use this in pasta dishes. I add it to my pasta sauces and my pizzas. I'm trying to think, there's one other way I like to use this. Oh, on my relish trays. So like at the holidays, we put out a relish tray with all different types of relishes, and I use that one with just like crackers and cream cheese, and it goes really well. Every recipe that I try to make for my own home, in my own house, I try to look at it and go, how can I make that how many different ways, right? Because if I'm going to put up 40 pounds of sloppy joes, not everybody wants to eat that on a bun every time I serve sloppy joes. So I want to look at what kind of casseroles can I make, what kind of pasta dishes can I make, what kind of loaded nachos can I make, or loaded tater tots, or, you know, I'm always trying to think, how can I can something and then transform it into something else so I can use my same menu and change it up. You guys know what food fatigue is? Food fatigue is what happens when you eat the same type of food every day. Anybody in college ever survive on ramen? Maybe, sort of. Maybe you moved out of mom's house and it was like, oh, I should have paid more attention. Hot dogs and macaroni and cheese again. Not that those things aren't lovely, but I'm just saying, you know, you can get a food fatigue from eating those same foods all of the time. Yeah. So I'm going to use 1 cup of sugar. Remember, I'm making a double recipe. In the book, it's a single. I'm going to use 1 cup of just white sugar. This helps to balance out the acidity. And also, because this is a pickled food, it hits its sweet spot right between like 4 and 6 weeks. 4 and 6 weeks. Now, you can eat this right out of the jar as soon as it's done. But at that 4 to 6 week mark, oh, so good, so much better. So we're going to get the brine going on the stove and just get it heated while we're adding our tomatoes to the jars.
What would this recipe taste like at Christmas?
Beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I could have used the empty one. Thank you, though.
I actually filled that one.
Well, I need 1 to water bath cannon.
Either one.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, let me answer that in just a second. Oh, gotta turn it on. Hang on. I was like, why is that not heating? Okay, so the question was, can I substitute Splenda? And the answer to that is yes for this recipe. And in my book, I do go over how to substitute for certain recipes and if it's available or not. Most of your jams and jellies, you can substitute sugars with no problem, especially, I don't know if you guys have seen, but like some of the Sure gels or some of the canning gels have actual low sugar and no sugar options. So that's really great. In pickling, it's the same way. It's the acid that is going to pickle the food that makes it safe. So the acid raises it, and the sugar binds to the acid, binds to the food, but so does sugar substitutes. So you can substitute honey, you could do Splenda. Anytime, or Swerve, I know a lot of canners that can with Swerve, they like that one. But anytime you are substituting anything in a recipe, my advice to you is to do it in a small batch. So you don't want to take an entire bushel of tomatoes and make a recipe that you've never tried before and put it on your shelves. What you really want to do is you want to do 4 or 5 jars. I usually do 3 jars or 4 jars. And what I do with that, I forgot all the other things. I'm going to put some garlic and spices in here first. What I mean by that is I will do up 4 jars, and then I will label them after I process them. And I'll put a 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, and sometimes like a 2-month or 3-month label on them. And then I will open that jar at 1 week, 1 day, 1 month, on and on. Because the food can taste differently, especially with pickling. Remember I said it's kind of a sweet spot between 4 and 6 weeks. So it will get sweeter over time. So I had a jar yesterday that I opened and took a bite of, and I was like, ooh, like the bite on it was really, it was very vinegary. But once you let that sit for a while, then it starts to mellow out and sweeten. So do that small batch canning. Try them at different intervals. And then your canning book, whatever canning book you use, mine, somebody else's, wherever you're getting your recipes from, that book should be a living document. I'm just adding garlic cloves to each of the jars, as many as you want. I got 2 to 3 on the recipe. But you want to really, really use that as a living document. It should be like any document where you're making notes. You're saying, yes, my family loved this. Tammy's going to tell you a story here about her father real quick. But it should be a living document. That way you can remember from year to year exactly.
Because I didn't write the recipe, you know, I didn't keep them all together. I grabbed them off this website and that website and over here and over there. And then when I went back to find it, I couldn't find the recipe again. So just keep a canning journal. It'll be worth its weight in gold. It'll keep you from making a lot of mistakes. It'll help you adjust the recipe from year to year on how you like it.
Yeah, I love that story. And we definitely have canning books at my house as well that has, you know, all these thumbprints in them and watermarks. And what I do is I keep a canning journal, and I suggest you do too. Keep a canning journal, even if you're not writing in your books, and just write down, I did this year, this year, this recipe went great, and this one just was a bombshell. You are going to find what your family likes. I've had a lot of people come up to me and say, man, I really wanted to like whatever, canned ground beef, but I just can't. It smells funny to me, or I don't like the texture of it. And what do I do with this 200 pounds of ground beef that I put up? And I'm like, ooh, 200 pounds, first go, huh? So you want to make sure that you're small batch canning and you're keeping notes for yourself.
And don't be afraid to do some substitutions. You know, you can substitute lime and lemon juice. So one of my favorite recipes is blueberry lime jam. The original recipe was blueberry lemon jam, but our family really likes the flavor combination of blueberries and lime better. So don't be afraid to make some of those lateral changes. I mean, don't go off the grid up and down different ways, but you can make some of those lateral changes. You know, change the lemon juice acid for lime juice, or like in salsa, some people like lemon juice better, some people like vinegar better. So there are some ways you can laterally change recipes to make them your own without going outside of the guidelines, like me, who does go outside of the guidelines sometimes.
So to these jars, I've added a couple cloves of garlic, a couple fresh, somebody help me out. Thank you. Basil leaves. And I do want to say that the spices that I'm adding, they're flavor enhancers. So if there's something you're allergic to, don't use it. If there's something you don't like the flavor of or your family doesn't, don't use it. These are all flavor enhancers. Also, my family, we love garlic, like super love garlic. So I wrote the recipe very mild. All the recipes in here are mild. But once you make it and you go, hey, Sarah's not right. That wasn't garlicky enough or something. Just know that the recipes in there are written for a very mild palate, and then you can adjust those spices as needed. Now, does anybody know what happens to spices when we can them? What happened? Do they dilute? That's close, but the other direction. They intensify. Spices intensify, and we'll talk about this in pressure canning, but for right now, water bath canning, they also intensify because they do leach into the liquid inside the jar, and because they do sit, right? So you're canning something so it is shelf stable, so you can put it on your shelves and not need any refrigeration. So because they're going to sit for a little bit longer, those spices really do leach into the water or the broth or the juice or whatever you're using, and can intensify over time. All right, so to this I'm adding mustard seed, coriander seed, and some peppercorns, about half a teaspoon of each. I'm also, you could use fresh dill if you want. I'm going to use some dill seed. Now, as far as it goes, using fresh or using dehydrated, it's totally up to you. Use what you have available to you. And you can also use pre-mixed spices. So basically what we're using here is what I would call a generic pickling spice. You can also buy these on your grocery shelves, but they're in those little tiny containers, and they're usually like $4 or $5 a piece. So price per pound or price per ounce, it is much cheaper to make your own in bulk, or like buy bulk pickling spices from Azure Standard or somewhere like that. Did you have your hand raised? No? Okay, sorry. So I make all my own pickling spices because it is just easier to make this in bulk and then throw it in a couple half-gallon jars and just dip into it all year round than it is for me to try to buy all of those spices in those little tiny containers I will use one of those in one canning session. Any questions so far? Yeah. Yeah, so dry tends to be a little less intense. And so usually when I'm using dry, I will add just a touch more. And especially if I'm putting, like the fresh basil I put in here, I actually tore the leaves, which you don't have to. But anytime you tear the plant or tear the herb, or you crush it with a mortar and pestle, something like that, anytime you do that, that taste intensifies. So I can use less basil if I just tear it up a little bit and let it intensify. Great question. All right, did I get all the spices in there? Coriander seed, mustard,
I'm going to butt in
peppercorn,
for a
garlic
second.
herbs.
General rule of thumb when you're cooking is 1/3 of dried to however much the recipe calls for of fresh. So that's a good guide you can follow too, is you need 1/3 of dried because it's dried is a little more concentrated. So if your recipe calls for 3 tablespoons of, fresh garlic, you might only want to do 1 tablespoon of the dried and start from there and go up to see how you like it.
So if you've never pickled anything before in your life, I promise you when you go to make this recipe, you're going to say, oh my gosh, Sarah screwed up. This smells horrible. It does. It absolutely does. When I am pickling, my son, I tell the story, the cowboy candy or the jalapeno candy, he will always come upstairs and go, oh my gosh, Mom, it smells so bad out here. Just open a window, please. I'm dying. I can't breathe. It's just the pickling brine that it's heating up, and it does smell horrible. I promise you it does not taste like it smells, and as soon as he finds out that I'm making jalapeno candy, he's like, oh, do you need any help? Can I help? What do you need me to do? So it does smell bad. I promise you, you have not made a mistake. It stinks.
So in that, you're heating up the vinegar and the sugar.
Yes, it's the vinegars, the sugar, a tablespoon of salt, and the water. And so the way I wrote the recipes, I tried to write them as beginner friendly as possible. So when you read the recipe, it will give you the ingredients that need to be heated on the stove, and then it will give you the ingredients per jar. So that allows you to decide if you want to double, triple, however many. Because if I've got 12 jars, all I need to know is I need half a teaspoon of peppercorns for each. Doesn't matter how many I'm using. So that's how I kind of laid out all the recipes so you can mass can them. Because who in here, there's not many people, but many people don't really can just 2 or 3 jars once or twice a year. Most of us can because we're trying to get food on the shelves. We're trying to make sure our harvest is preserved, so we've got some food security. So I wanted to write this in a way that you line up all the jars if you wanted to. Yeah. That's right. That's right. She said it works well because if you've got a lot and you need to get a lot on the shelves, it works. But also if you just have a little bit at the end of the season that you want to use, it still works. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Cowboy candy? Yeah. The pickling brine itself is the acid inducer for that. So oh, you mean is it as sweet? Is that what you're asking? Is the texture the same? Have you used Splenda in cowboy candy? Because I haven't. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that Splenda is cup for cup when it comes to sugar, and it is as sweet as sugar. And some people even find it slightly sweeter than sugar. But as far as the consistency, is it like an actual candy coating? I don't know. If you've ever had cowboy candy, it has like a syrupy coating to it, like a maple syrup, but it doesn't taste like maple syrup.
I've used the powdered baking stevia. Stevia. I'm allergic to anything Splenda or aspartame, so I can't speak to those because they make me violently ill. But I have used the baking stevia. Stevia is a plant, not a chemical, and so I do much better with that. I have used that. You just have to boil it a little longer to make it get to that maple syrup kind of consistency. Yeah.
And again, anytime you are looking at a recipe and you're like, my family can't have this or I can't have that, go with what you can have and do a small batch. If you are worried about pH, if you are worried about acidity, you can literally get the little strips online. You can go to Amazon or whatever, the pH testing strips. You can dip that strip down into your brine. It's going to give you a pH acid level. So you can do all that at home yourself. Oh, fancy. I want one of those. She's got a digital one. Yeah, yeah. The other thing with this is these don't need lemon juice. So some of your tomato products, they are right on the line of acidity. Like, do I need lemon juice? Don't I need? There's a couple topics that if you wanted to actually like start a canning war, this is one of them for sure.
If you want to get blocked, banned, and not allowed back into certain groups, just ask them about water bathing green beans, and you'll start World War III.
Yeah, so in adding lemons to tomatoes, not adding lemons to tomatoes, I'm going to tell you this. Every single tomato is different. Your tomato from your backyard is going to be different than mine, even if they're the same seed, the same species of tomato, everything. Because what's in the soil goes into the food. And so the acid level on a food can change drastically from your tomatoes to my tomatoes, and we're right next door and we're right doing the same exact thing. All right? And so when you look at other canning books, it will say, you have to add lemon juice to do this. You don't have to add it for that. It changes all the time, all the time. So what you can do is you can get those pH testing strips, number one. Or number two, lemon is a wonderful addition to tomatoes and tomato products. It actually brightens and freshens the flavor of a tomato. And so you can add just a little tiny bit of tomato juice to every single jar, put your mind at ease, raise the acidity. If you want to start a war, ask somebody if they use lemon juice in their tomatoes. For sure. No, you don't have to test them all the time. I said you can test it if you want to like put your mind at ease. So what you want is in your canning books, it will give you the exact recipe to follow. Yeah, just do that. Yeah, you're totally fine. But some people do get very nervous, especially when they have first started canning, and they want that visual confirmation of, okay, my strip is in the green, and I know my food is good, and I did a good job, or I did the right thing. And that's okay too. I just like to try to give everybody as many options as possible so you can do what you're comfortable with.
And with tomatoes, there's so many different varieties of tomatoes, but there are tomatoes that have been bred for 100 years to slice and put on a sandwich. And they don't have the acidity of the tomatoes that have been bred for the last 100 years to be canned. Well, the people that are doing the testing can't say that you're using Roma's versus Dr. Weeche's. They don't know what you're using in your home, so they have to do a blanket statement and tell you what works for the lowest acid slicer tomato or cherry tomato as opposed to what works for a canning tomato. And so that's also, they're trying to protect you. They have your best interests at heart, and so that's part of the reason. And I'm a why learner. I had to tell you why. It was an impulse. I'm sorry, Sarah.
Oh, no, you're fine. All right, so what we're going to do next is we're going to fill it up with that hot brine. And you can use a ladle to do this and ladle it in. We're going to fill to 1 inch headspace. I do want to tell you I am going to just pour this in just because I'm an experienced canner. It's super quick for me this way, but you should ladle.
Explain the 1 inch headspace.
Absolutely. Okay, so the headspace refers to, let me use an empty jar. The headspace refers to the space between the top level line of where your food comes and the top of the jar. That's the headspace. It's the air space, if you will. It's the space that's not filled with anything. And so a 1 inch headspace measures to that first ring. If you're old school, you can still do this. You turn the jar halfway. There's another ring in the middle, and then there's another ring at the top, and that goes 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, etc. So that is the space right in here. That's chapter 4 in your book when we talk about exactly the terminology for headspace. What I do want to say is when you are following a canning recipe, that headspace is before you can it. So it's when you put the food in the jar. Right now we're going to put the food in the jar. It's a 1 inch headspace because look at what it looks like when you're done. That's more than 1 inch, correct? Yeah, it's underneath the lip of the jar. Does anybody know why that happened? No, I didn't get any siphoning. Yeah, the food it shrinks. It gets soft. It smushes down. In fact, when you make some recipes like the jalapeno candy that we're talking about, those will actually float to the very top. Oh, here. Sometimes they will float to the very top as things kind of separate. And then as they sit over time, they reabsorb that juice, they start to expand, and they start to fill the jar again. So that headspace sometimes can look less than what you started with, and that's because of the shrinkage of the food. Okay? So that's perfectly normal. Also, it's perfectly normal for tomatoes to float. They are a very high water food, so they will separate inside the jars. Where's the other one? Okay. Any other questions about headspace or what to fill it up to? No? Okay, so yeah, you're welcome. The ladle I'm talking about is something like this. You would put the funnel on top of the jar. The funnel helps protect the lip of the jar so you don't get a bunch of food particles on the lip of the jar. You want that as clean as possible so you get a nice seal of your lid. All right? So I'm going to use a funnel, and I'm just going to pour this because it's a lot quicker. I'm going to get 3 or 4 jars in there. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then I'll finish up while Tammy starts walking you through dairy products. Not yet, Tammy. I'm almost done.
We're good. I was just checking the time.
How am I on time?
We're 20 minutes. We're good.
Oh, okay. The other thing is the debubbling process. So if you have a food with a lot of little food bits and a lot of liquid, I use a wooden skewer. Some people use a debubbler. It's an actual like plastic piece that comes in your kits. I just use a wooden skewer because I'm cheap and I can get these at the dollar store for really cheap and I can recycle them. And you just are going to run this in the jar like so. Tap down a little bit, and what this does is it releases any air bubbles that may be in between the tomatoes, and then once you've released the air bubbles, you may need to adjust your headspace again because it's filled up with liquid, and so you got a little more headspace. We're still sitting at about 1 inch here, so I'm going to call that jar good. We're going to...
Is it okay to use a butter knife? Sometimes I do.
Your kitchen, your rules. So, some people...
I'm like, I don't have that, so I just shove a butter knife.
These, you get a package of 100 at the Dollar Tree for $1.25 because it's not the Dollar Tree anymore. We call it the 5-quarter tree now. So if you have 5 quarters, you can get 100 of these, and then when I'm done, I break these and they go into either the compost or sometimes I use them in the garden as sticks for my seedlings, so I know what's in my garden. But anyways, okay, back to the butter knife. Boo, 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 boo. If you use metal inside of a jar, there is a train of thought, and it's somewhat true, that the metal can react with the liquid that is in the jar and create more bubbles. So that's why a lot of people say stay away from that. Use a rubber spatula, use something that is silicone, something that won't react with it and create more bubbles on you when you're trying to eliminate bubbles. The reason we don't want any bubbles in there, and you cannot get it perfect, you're just doing the best you can. Some people tap it down, some people use these. The reason we don't want bubbles is we want even heating all the way around the jars. Okay, once you have 1 jar done, like me, I'm just going to show you. We're going to put the lid on. Everything has been pre-washed, so we're nice and clean. These lids, the Superb lids, is anybody currently using these? Like them? Like them? Does anybody not like them? Okay. I've been using these for about 2 years. Tammy's been using them a little bit longer than I have. And we love these. So I know. John's like, you're the face.
It makes you feel so successful.
Yes.
Louder than any lid I've ever used.
Yes, it does pop a lot louder. And the first time it popped inside my pressure canner. And I thought a jar broke because there's like a loud echo in a pressure canner. And I tripped over the dog because I thought, oh my God, my jar broke. And it was the lid. It's just that loud. It's a very thick metal. It's the only one that I use in my canning. We do about 2,000, 2,500 jars a year, depending on how many deer I take. And I'm just wiping the rims with vinegar, and I got a little sugar on that one. but they're thick. They're coated 5 times. You don't get that corrosion and rust that you get with some of the other brands. I don't know what else to say except it's just a more superior type of lid. Also, they're very readily available. Now we're getting them in our stores all over the place, and they're cheaper than a lot of the other lids. I do have some older lids that I sometimes use for like my dehydrated goods or like my herbs and things because I don't want to get rid of them, right? I paid for them. I want to use them. But as far as like trusting food to something, these are the only ones I trust my actual food to that we're going to be eating. All right, so once you wipe the rim, you center the lid and you put this on. This is the ring, finger light. I know, your grandma said finger tight. Probably for 100 years, we've been saying finger tight. Last year I said we're not using that word anymore. I'm inventing a new word. It's called finger light. Because the word tight to you means something different to you, means something different to you, right? We all have a different degree of tightness. So what I teach everybody is 3 fingers on the jar. You're going to put the lid on. Normally this is on the countertop, but I'm going to hold it up so you can see. I'm just going to turn this with those 3 fingers until the ring engages with the jar and the jar starts to spin. That's it. That's it. That's all you need. Now, our older lids, we used to have to crank them down. I've been canning a couple decades now. Tammy can tell you too. There was a reason we cranked those down. They had rubber in them. The lids were different. They were treated differently. We had to boil them. We had to preheat them. There was a whole different set of standards and rules that we had to use with those lids. We have newer lids. They're made of newer materials. They do not need that, and in fact, they don't function as well when we do that. They need to be loose enough that the lid does not prematurely seal and that it allows the air out of the jar. What causes our food to spoil? Air. 100% air. Sunlight also helps break it down, microbes, enzymes, all of those things, but actual air is the #1 killer of food. I don't. Tatler lids, I do. If you use Tatler lids. Full water goes in. So you can get siphoning where the water comes out, but for water to actually come in, that means that you didn't get any pressure in the jar to push that air out. So I would definitely suggest checking to make sure you have a full rolling boil happening and that they're fully boiling when you get them in there before you start your timer. Because the oxygen, the way this works is all sciencey stuff. The pressure inside the jar will push the oxygen out. That the liquids in this jar, the air in this jar, everything is trying to escape. As the jar is heated on the inside, it's trying to escape. So your liquids and your oxygen should be going outwards. Now, when you look at a jar and it's done, it's not that there's food all the way up to the top. But what we've created here is what we call an anaerobic environment or aromatic environment. It's an environment without oxygen. So even though you see space in there, there's no oxygen in there. Does that help? Okay. Tatler lids are reusable lids. They're very finicky. They're very hard to use. Okay, I have 2 answers for that. I'm going to get these in here while we talk about it. Tammy, could you possibly fill me up with some more water in that one? Because I don't think I'm going to have enough.
They're both full. I've got them both. They're both going. This one's the one actually heated.
Oh, that'll work. Oh, wait. There's no trivet in that one. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. You got an extra one? Perfect. That's the trivet, by the way. Come on, Titanic, sink. All right.
That's why the first jar always goes in the center to hold the trivet down.
So we're talking about lids and reusing lids, and while we're doing that, I'm going to keep filling jars. So any manufacturer is going to tell you that their lids are one-time use and they're done. Ball lids have a 18-month seal. I think Kerr has an 18-month seal. Superb has a 36-month seal, so a 3-year seal on theirs. And then the Tatlers and a couple other companies are what we call reusable. They're actually like plastic, BPA-free plastic lids.
I canned stuff 6 years ago. That's the first time I got my hands on these lids, I can tell you that I still have stuff I canned 6 years ago that is still sealed well with these lids.
Yeah. So when we give testimonies, it's just because we can so much food. So the lid manufacturers will tell you they're a one and done. And the reason they do that one and done is because when that canning lid leaves its factory, it has passed all of the inspections for that canning lid. Once you use that canning lid, they can no longer say, we don't know what you've done to it, so we're not sure if you can reuse it again, don't do it. So you're always going to hear from your manufacturers, don't. We talked about earlier canning wars. That is another canning war question. The third one is stacking jars, if you guys want to talk about that later. That's a fun one.
They really love it when I disprove all of the things that they say by quoting the agency that they should have looked at in the first place that says if you put cardboard between it, you can stack them 4 high. But they never come up with that answer before they get told that. I don't know why. They always say, oh no, you can't do that.
So, have I reused lids? Absolutely. I don't know if you remember, but like
you should always take
2019,
those off.
huh?
Yeah, but you stack them like that, that's okay.
2019, 2020, we had a lid shortage, like a huge lid shortage, not a small one. If you were canning during that time, we were scrambling. And what happened was Superb kind of came in and they're like, hey, we can help. Like, we have a factory, we have people, what do you need from us? And so it took like 400 Amish families that came together and said, let's figure this out. If you guys can make them, we can tell you what we need from them. And so during that time, a lot of us that were not reusing lids at the time even started reusing lids because we didn't have a choice at that point. I will say this, if you are bending any rules ever in canning, you better know what you're doing. And what I mean by that is you got to know what you're looking for. It's not just about knowing how to do something, but it's about knowing how not to do it. So with your reusing of canning lids, you want to make sure there's no rust, no dents, that the silicone on the outside is nice and fluffy for you. You need to know what to look for and what not to look for. The other thing is it worth the price of your food? That's the other thing. You are going to put hours of labor love into growing this food, pulling this food, or even if you don't grow it, you're going to spend an hour canning it up. All to have that fail over a 3-cent lid. So I suggest if you do a lot of canning, get that baker's dozen. That's going to get you through at least the first part of your canning season. You may only need to buy 2 of those a year. You've invested in the equipment, you've invested in food, you've invested in the time. Invest in the lids. I mean, it makes no sense to cheap out right at that last second and lose all your food. So that's my opinion on reusing lids. I'm going to keep going with this. If you guys don't have any questions on how to do this bruschetta, I'm going to start the timer for 10 minutes once I get a full rolling boil, and then I'm going to pass this to Tammy. Yeah. Yeah, so what I do is if I have a frozen product but a hot brine, I will let those tomatoes thaw first. Otherwise, when I add the hot brine, everything just cools off real quick. But yeah, that's a great question. And you can actually stick them in your refrigerator overnight and just let them thaw in there overnight and then start your canning in the morning. In order to do this, you need 2 inches of water over the top of the jars. Water bath is completely submerged. Don't forget that part. Sure. You're talking about like expiration dates and things like that. So in our household, what we try to do is rotate everything in a 1 to 3 year rotation. It gives us the best quality of food and the best nutritional value. But here's the thing. If you processed it properly, if it is sealed, if it stays in the perfect environment, no sunlight, no rapid, it stays forever. It stays forever. So it's not like your tomatoes just all of a sudden in 20 years are like, oh, I'm not going to be edible anymore. But what happens is they change over time. So who wants to eat 20-year-old tomatoes? So 1 to 3 years about. We do ours harvest to harvest. So come July, come August, I want my shelves almost empty. If there is 40 quarts of corn left on my shelf, I know I planted too much the year before, or I got too much the year before, and I need to adjust for the upcoming year. And so I am a type A, and so what I do is I keep a spreadsheet because I run my house like a business, and I track what did I grow, what did I buy, how much did we can, how much did we eat. And I do that quarterly. So every 3 months I go in there and I just log how many jars did we use of that, and then I adjust from year to year so I make sure that we have enough for us.
Maybe my last question. You're putting this in not a roaring boil. You're just then turning it on to a roaring boil?
You can't start the timer until you have a roaring boil.
But you can put them in there when they're just...
That you can put them in there during a roaring boil because I've got a hot brine and I've got warm hot jars. Yep. So if it's already boiling really good for you, go ahead and put them in. As long as it stays at a rolling boil, you can go ahead and start your timer for 10 minutes.
Also put them in if it's not a roaring boil.
That's correct. And turn it up very, very high. Wait for it to come to a rolling boil and then start your timer. Great questions. Thank you, guys. I'm going to turn this over to Tammy. She's going to talk to you about pressure canning and dairy products, and then we're just kind of flip-flop back and forth. Does everybody need a break? Are you guys good? I don't know. You want to give a break for 5 minutes or something?
I'm ready, but feel free to walk in and out.
So she's going to start, and I'm going to just keep canning.
Well, today we're on more of a time crunch, so we kind of got to get done on time today.
That is true.
I'm going to talk about pressure canning milk. So the number one question, the first thing I get asked is, milk isn't an acid. Well, those 11 credits I took in chemistry and analytic chemistry, the chemical name for milk is lactic acid. Okay, we're done with that question. We've got beyond that. Milk doesn't follow any of the rules. That's another reason that it is kind of frowned upon by the alphabet soup agencies, as I like to call them. So it is not a tested recipe that I'm showing you today, other than time tested. So let's give you a little history. How many people have went to the store to make pumpkin pie and bought something in a little can who had a cow on the front and it was Borden's? Okay, so Borden's has been canning milk since before 1857. He opened his first plant in 1857. He got his patent, he applied for it and got his patent in 1856, I believe. Don't quote me on the dates, I might be a little off. I get nervous when I get up here and then dates go out the window. The USDA was created May 15th, 1862. It was part of the war effort. You may have heard of this war. It was the Civil War by President Lincoln. Because meat packing industry was so horrible, they were shipping rotten meat to our soldiers on the front lines. And so the USDA, for the first 20-some years they were in existence, were only concerned with putting that little blue stamp on your prime rib steak with the little shield that says USDA. They were really just concerned with meat packing. They didn't become involved with the rest of the food industry until much, much later. By that time, we've been canning milk for 40-some years at home and in those factories with, milk companies. And so back then, the government didn't waste our money and test something that had already been time tested. So they probably will never test milk. And that's okay with me. In my kitchen, I like this. It's something I really like having on my shelf. I like to have the milk on my shelf because I have teenagers. If you've ever had a 15-year-old boy at your house and you go out and you get a gallon of milk and you think it's going to last you 3 or 4 days, and you go to the refrigerator the next day and you wonder how one human being can drink an entire gallon of milk in 24 hours, you've met my 15-year-old. And so I might have those bananas he begged me to get and then didn't eat that are now turning brown, and I don't want to have to drive 30 minutes to the store to get more milk so I can make banana bread. And so I'll show you the one I canned yesterday. So I'm going to have this on my shelf. I always do it in pints because most of my recipes call for 2 cups, or I'm doubling a recipe and it makes it 2 cups. And so I like to have some on my shelf, for when, milk is not in season, those times when milk is really high priced. I have a few things on my shelf. I can use this for baking. I also love to go camping. I go way back in the woods where nobody can find me except the mosquitoes. And when I'm back there, I don't like putting the milk in my cooler because if you've ever put milk in your cooler to make pancakes or something in the morning, it doesn't do well in the cooler and makes everything in the cooler nasty in 2 hot days, not even this hot of a day. And so I love having this. I can take it with me camping, and I don't have to refrigerate it. It's shelf ready, shelf stable. And I can, get around that 15-year-old drinking a whole gallon of milk, or I can go out in the backwoods and I don't have to have it refrigerated. So, yes.
So if I'm using, say, D milk, can I can D milk? Does it have to be 1%?
You can can any milk you can buy at the store or get from a cow or goat. I can't tell you about sheep's milk because I've never milked a sheep to get the milk. I love the cheese, but I've never canned it, so I won't. Or camel's milk. I mean, there's lots of animals you can get milk from, but yes. But here's the thing: if you do skim milk, it's going to evaporate a little bit, and it's going to turn out more like 1%. If you do 1%, it's going to evaporate, and it's going to turn out like 2. If you can 2%, it's going to come out like whole milk. Here's the secret: whole milk is what actually 4%. So the only way you're getting actual, real, whole, 100% milk is if you're getting it from the cow that you milked yourself that day. It's not. It's only whole milk in the store is 4%. Yes. Yes, it does pasteurize in the jar when you can it. Yes.
You talk about UHF. I mean, UHF milk, the ultra high temperature, UHT.
Oh, the ultra
high
pasteurized.
temperature.
Yeah, the ultra high pasteurization that you might get from some milks at the store.
Yeah, shelf stable milks.
A lot of the shelf stable, yes. Those have been, yeah. Like if you get it in Europe, they've been irradiated, and that's how they preserve it on the shelf. To kill the bacteria, they irradiated it, and then they bottle it. That wasn't allowed here until just recently. I see that you can see those on the shelf, but that's the process that they've went through with those. I wouldn't recommend doing it. They've already kind of changed the texture when they do that, so I wouldn't recommend recanning those. But yeah, you can do goat's milk, you can do cow's milk. I would recommend, though, you're going to want to take and skim that milk and get all that nice cream off, because you want to make butter. We can can the butter. We'll talk about that another day. Okay, you can do things with that butter. You can make ghee, you can make it shelf stable, but you want to get that product off. You don't really want it in your canned milk because it's going to make it really super rich, more like a really super rich coffee creamer. Yeah, goat's milk is harder to separate. I just can goat's milk straight up. Yeah. Because the goat's milk is already homogenized.
What percentage, like say for instance, I want to make my own coffee creamer, what percentage of milk do you run?
I love it extra creamy, so I'm going to say whole milk. Yeah, whole milk. And then if you do want to make this as a coffee creamer, you can add a splash of vanilla. You can add, a little teaspoon of cocoa powder. It's going to become sweeter. What happens is the sugars in the milk caramelize, and it makes it sweeter. So it isn't going to be the same as like I would drink out of this gallon jug. It's not going to be the same. It's actually going to be a lot sweeter. So I wouldn't put this milk, I'd refrigerate it, but I would use it over bran flakes before I'd use it over Fruit Loops. There's only so much sugar your teeth can take without getting a toothache. So. I know people that have done it. I've not personally done it. I don't recommend it because really it's cheaper to go get a gallon of whole milk. Why would I go buy the expensive stuff that's twice the price to can it when I can can this and make it taste like that? I'm not going to do that. I'm Scotch Irish heritage and I'm very frugal. So again, 1-inch headspace, and the the funnel companies all made this 1 inch. So the bottom of your funnel is 1-inch headspace in your jar. So if you're standing like here and above and looking down, when you get to the bottom of the funnel, you're pretty much assured you're at the 1-inch headspace. So has anybody here made cheese? Anybody made a farmer's cheese? Only by accident. What do you add to your milk to make cheese? You use vinegar, yes. Okay, so in case you've noticed, I'm not using vinegar to wipe my jars. I'm not putting any vinegar in my canner. I have no desire to make a cheese product out of this milk. And that's the number one mistake. People will be like, what did I do? It all curdled in the jar. And I'm like, I told you not to use vinegar or any acid, anything. Don't add any additives to your water. If it's hard water, you're going to live with these jars being hard water. Okay? You don't want to do that to your milk because then you're making cheese. And you can find some uses for it, but it's not going to be the product you were looking for in the first place. So, all right. Yes. Certainly, anytime. Okay. No, there's no difference in raw milk except you do want to get as much cream off as you can. Because it becomes richer in the jar, it caramelizes those sugars. So you use your cream, make your butter. Yep. Yeah, use your skim milk, definitely. Skim milk's going to turn out a lot more like 1% or 2%. From yeah. So, yeah, then it's going to turn out more like store-bought whole milk. Because store-bought whole milk is only 4%. You know, we're paying for a lot of water. All right. So I'm going to get these in the canner, and then we're going to talk some more.
Third time's a charm.
I'm just going to talk real quick while she's loading her canner, if you don't mind. Okay. Another thing you can see happening sometimes to your milk is if you know anything about actual like milk that comes from a cow that hasn't been processed and all those things, it has different sugar content per cow, depending on what they eat, depending on what time of year it is, depending on if they just calved, all of these things. So it is not uncommon to see your canned milk turn brown, turn pink, just a tinge, turn different colors of tan. It came from a pink cow. You got strawberry milk now.
So,
yeah, don't freak out. It's the lactose. So as you're heating this, if it's a higher sugar content, it'll start to turn more tan because of the lactose that is cooking inside of the milk. It's the sugars inside the milk. Go ahead, Tammy, sorry.
so just to step up on that, this is the one I canned yesterday. This is the milk that's going into the canner. The store-bought, there's not much difference. But if you have a cow that's getting fed really good, rich hay, it's going to have more sugars. It's going to be beige or tan. It's going to have a different color, and that's okay. That's just the sugar.
Would that be the same like for goat's milk? Like if they're feeding them really good?
It doesn't matter what the animal, the sugar content, if it starts to get hot enough, it will caramelize slightly, and that's what gives it that tan color. Just like when you cook sugars. You know, like if you make a caramel sauce or something. Also, it'll be really, really sweet and yummy.
All right. I'm way away from it. All right, so we have our canner. I'm going to try to make sure that I get the lid on there evenly. I'm going to do that by going from side to side as I tighten it down. 1 inch head space, yeah.
I might melt the microphone, actually.
I melted yesterday standing
Oh
here.
my gosh. That's free spa day. Free spa day.
I stood at that microphone and I just about passed out.
That should be better.
People pay a lot of money for that steam.
I know, but if you're a canner, you get it for free. Everybody says, you don't have 5 kids. There's no way you're pushing 50. So, well, I can a lot. It's all the free spa days. Oh, don't do what I'm doing. Use a jar lifter. You're going to burn your fingers. I have canner's fingers. They're like carpenter's fingers, right?
Tell them what you said yesterday about them not lining up perfectly. Sure. Yeah. Because this one's
We have 11 units left.
11 units left, as they have 11 of those left. And for cash purchases right now, they're taking off an additional
$50 off the factory second models.
So the factory second models. So the factory second models are already about $100 off. Now they're going to take another $50 off of that. So this is probably the cheapest you're ever going to find these. But they're right over here. They've got the different sizes there. And when we come back and can the carnitas, I'm going to go through step by step on how to use these.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Do not trip each other.
It is cooler on that end. It's going that way. It is cool. They turned the fan around, maybe. That's why. See, it's not just me.
The problem will be, can we find the correct temperature real quick? Start here, because that's where I usually start. It might take a little bit. You want me to crank it up a little bit higher?
Yeah, I did it straight down.
Straight down? Go for it, yep. Okay.
And then I tweaked it once it's steamed. I turned it a quarter turn.
You're all set. Do you have a weight?
It's on that way. But one breaks all the rules. All right, it's an exception to all the rules. All right, how many of you know what pressure you're supposed to use at your altitude? I'm going to quiz you. How many are 5 pounds of pressure? Okay, so there's nobody from Florida here at below sea level. All right, how many of you are 15 pounds of pressure? Okay, nobody came from Colorado or a high mountain state either. All right, generally speaking in the Midwest, we're all 10 pounds of pressure. All right, now, there are some exceptions to the 10-pound rule. There are rules rebels won't break. I won't break the longest time and ingredient rule, and I won't break using the correct pressure rule, okay? But I do know that if I want to pressure can peaches, who would want to pressure can peaches? But if I want to pressure can peaches, instead of 10 at my altitude, I bump down and I do 5, right? I mean, it only makes sense. You don't want to have peach sauce. You're canning to have peach slices. And so that is one of those things. You read your fine print in your book, it'll tell you, I got to move microphones. It'll tell you that you only have to do 5 pounds for peaches. Milk is another one of those rare exceptions to your 10-pound rule. You bump it down 5. So if you are a 10 pressure in your area, for milk, you're going to do 5. If you live in Colorado in the mountains, you're still going to bump it down 5 to use 10. If you're in Florida, I'm sorry, the bottom line is 5. You're staying at 5. Okay? But will it hurt it if I go up? If I do it at 10? No, it's just going to caramelize that sugar more. Okay? So, but so if you did it at 10, don't throw it out. It's not bad. It's not burnt. It's just a little overcooked. Okay, so I'm going to use 5. So once we get our 10-minute vent, just like every other time, but very important right now, if you're one of those people that are more rebel than me and you skip the venting, okay, that's your kitchen, your rules. I would not do that for this recipe. Okay, do not do that for this recipe. All right, so you're going to do your 10-minute vent time, and then I will kind of take it from there as we're going through. I don't want to get ahead of myself. But it also follows some other odd patterns that don't follow all the natural rules you're used to in canning. Okay. She didn't put anything in there, did she? We're going to turn off the empty water bath canner and turn on the full one. What is she? Sarah, where did she go? What did she have this on? All right, well, it's on, it's starting, we'll watch it, we'll keep it. She said it yesterday and it's not following the same pattern, but anyway, so this one is empty, this one is full. Whew, that explains why it was steaming so fast. All right. Yes, let's do some questions while I'm waiting for my vent time.
I just now, like within the past hour, ordered my first All-American canning, so I'm watching
Uh-huh. It's just this stove. It's no normal on this stove. Yeah, it's this stove. I'm going to turn it just a little bit because it didn't do that as much yesterday, so maybe just where it's at. Yeah, that's a commercial stove. Yes. No, it's then cooked. So you do lose some of those benefits of having the raw product. Like anything you can, okay, raw is always better. Okay, a raw diet is always better. I don't recommend that you go out and eat 3 meals a day of canned food. Okay? But no people are generally doing that. You know, you're going to throw some nice fresh fruits on your cereal. You know, you might have canned chicken, but you're going to have some fresh green beans, or maybe you're going to have a salad with it, maybe, you know. So try to balance your canned food with some fresh, because that's what's best for our gut as human beings. We need some of those living raw foods in our gut every day. So make sure that you eat some of those too. This is just to help supplement. I can tell you, Sarah?
Yes, ma'am.
You had this one on, but that's the one you had stuff in. I need you to adjust the temperature.
Of course I did.
Yes. So
That's smart. Okay.
perfect.
That one's off.
All right. So I lost my place. I'm sorry. So eat something every day that is raw. Don't just eat a diet of this. Oh, I know where I was going. So how many homesteaders that are just starting out do you think are going to be successful if they don't put up hay in the barn for their animals for the winter? None. Right. Nobody succeeds that way. Well, it's sort of the same thing for the farmer. If you don't put away some food when you have a bountiful harvest for those times when things are lean, you're not going to be a very successful cook. You also have to plan for yourself. Sarah said, cycle of plants. So I always plan for 2 to 3 years of having food in my pantry because I live in Michigan. We get these late frosts, like Sarah said, in June it might snow in the UP. You know, we get these late frosts that wipe out our entire harvest, and we don't get any apples that year. Well, I want applesauce on my shelf because not only do I eat applesauce, I also bake with applesauce. So there's lots of products that are useful. Yesterday, I'm going to skip ahead, sorry, Sarah. Yesterday we talked about canning beans. And the juice from garbanzo called aquafaba, you can use that as an egg substitute in baking. No kidding. That is what vegans and vegetarians are. Yes, chickpeas. Yes, you drain that juice and then you use that, it's called aquafaba, and you use that to bake with. You know, save those chicken eggs for breakfast and use the aquafaba in your banana bread. Yes, you can freeze it and use it, yes. And then you could also throw it in your soups, you know, instead of using water in your soup. A lot of the juices that you open up your cans, drain that juice. When they measure the vitamins in canned goods, they're only measuring whole amounts of vitamin. They're only measuring the exact whole vitamin D. They're only matching the exact whole vitamin E, the whole vitamin B. When you can, some of those vitamins get broke down, especially over time. Okay, the components are still in that jar. There's still this half of the vitamin, the complete protein. It just takes a little energy at the cellular level in our body. Okay, so don't underestimate or don't have people tell you that it's not as nutritious, but don't waste half of it in that juice that you pour down the drain. If it's fruit juice, drink it. Throw it in your lemonade. Throw the peach water that you've canned in your lemonade and have peach lemonade. Okay, don't waste your food. Okay, a lot of things we as Americans take for granted and pour down the sink actually has a nutritional value. You know, is the ABC agency going to measure the partial components of vitamin D in the food? No, they're only interested in the whole amounts. All right? So when people say it has less nutritional value, it's because they're not thinking on the cellular level of how our bodies operate. They only want to know the whole amounts in there. Okay? That's my soapbox for the day. Still just waiting for this to vent. Yes. All right. So here's the thing with milk. We're going to vent for our 10 minutes. We're going to put on the 5 pounds instead of 10. And then the next question you're all going to be sitting there trying to write on your thing is, what is the time? And this is where milk also is an exception. The time is not a measured time at 5 pounds of pressure. As soon as you get it up to 5 pounds of pressure, you shut that canner off and you leave it alone until it's cool to the touch. And I don't mean like, okay, I can touch this one even though she had it on accidentally. I can go like that and touch it. It is still hot. I don't want to leave my hand on it because it is going to burn if I leave it there over time. So the time for milk is the time it takes your canner to completely cool. Yes, if you have the ability, you know, if your shoulders aren't hurting like mine and you can move it off to a trivet or off to another burner, then you can go ahead and it'll do it a little bit faster by moving it off. But if you can't, just leave it on that burner and you don't touch it until it's completely cool. Then you can, when it's cool, you can go ahead and take your jars out and set, and they will pop. Yesterday, even in this heat, they popped like right away, you know, and sealed. Yes. You can use just a dry paper towel, or you can do one that's moistened with tap water. It doesn't matter either way. You just want to get the milk off so that there's not food particles underneath that seal. All right? Yes. You vent for 10 minutes. Then you put the 5 pound instead of 10, you put 5 pounds because that's the exception. And then when you see on the dial gauge that it gets up to 5, now 6 on the gauge is 5 on the weight. So it won't start jiggling until it gets over 5 on the gauge. So as soon as it starts to jiggle, you can turn it off and just leave it and let it set. So, and I talked about it yesterday, and I had an extra weight I could show you. I call it I used to live in Florida when I was younger. I lived in Michigan in the winter and Florida in the summer. I was one of those snowbirds that traveled back and forth. We took care of my grandparents, and they couldn't stand the cold winter, so we would take them to Florida in the summer, and then or in the winter, and then we couldn't stand the heat in the summer in Florida. We'd go back to Michigan. But jigglers that jiggle, okay, you want it to be that snake that's from me to halfway in the crowd telling you, I see you, I don't want you in my territory, get away from me, that kind of a jiggle. You don't want the angry snake that you're about to step on that all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm in the wrong place at the wrong time, that's going. You want that slow, steady rock as opposed to that angry, hard rock of the jiggler. So I got to keep running back and forth. Sorry to test this. Can somebody set it on your phone? Can you set a 10-minute timer for me? All right. See, you can make coffee creamer with this just by adding a few ingredients. So if you want to, I think they've got a coffee thing right here, and they have those little Italian flavorings. You can add a splash in there. It won't hurt. It's the same time. It doesn't change the time. If you add a splash of that caramel flavoring, or a little bit of, I've added cocoa powder. So what she's saying is you can buy a pH meter. There's some really nice ones that have a buffer solution that you test, so you're calibrating it every time. And then if you use that, you're at the right pH. I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. It's steaming more. I don't want to dry it. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's a great one. But you don't even have to go that technical. You can just get the little dipping strips. Do you have a question? Oh, you're just, okay. All right, just making sure. Yes. Okay, everybody kept asking me that because I only can to have like a 2-year supply. So 8 years ago, I think it was 8 years ago, I did a 9-jar batch. I'm at 8 years, and the 8-year mark, it's still the same as the first year. Unfortunately, after 9 years, does anybody really going to care if it's after? So next year, my answer will be 9 or more, because I will only have tested it for the 9 jars. But I labeled them for the year, and I won't let my kids open them. Those are the jars that 1 a year I open until I'm done. You know, hopefully things are being rotated off my shelves better than that. I do have a funny story. If anybody wants to come to Michigan and get canned potatoes, I'd really like my jars back. As homesteaders, you know, and as a mom of a lot of kids, okay, there have been 18 children through my home, some by birth, some by adoption, some by foster care, some by, hey, I don't have a great situation, and my mom said I could come live with you. Okay, so I've had never more than 5 at a time, but I've had 18 children in my home that I've raised. And if somebody says, hey, would you like to glean potatoes behind the potato picker? I'm like, oh yeah, I'm all for it. They're like, bring as many totes as you can. You know those great big ones that at Walmart that are half the size of this table and 3.5? You can get about 500 pounds of potatoes in 3 of those. I am not humanly capable of canning 500 pounds of potatoes in 1 year. I believe I got 300 canned. Everybody keeps saying, Tammy, why don't you do a video on canned potatoes? My children, we ate potatoes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We ate potatoes in casserole. I canned potato soup. I won't do it again. It's one of those experiments. I canned German potato salad. No, that's something I don't want to do again. But thank goodness it was a small batch. But I still have probably 200 jars of potatoes on my shelf, and please, I would like my jars back. So, you know, if you make too much jam, and you give somebody, you give your neighbor jam, or you give the postman a nice jam with a bow on it, or, you know, you give somebody you know in your community that's in need, or you can donate jam to the food pantry. Cottage laws in Michigan say I can go to a farmer's market and sell it if I want. Nobody thinks it's a wonderful gift at Christmas to get a jar of canned potatoes. I don't understand it myself. I think it would be a great gift, but I can't give these things away. So one of the things we do as new canners is we get so over-ambitious. You know, I'm going to can. Please, you want your jars. Don't can a lifetime supply of anything. Because you have food fatigue. You'll be so tired of eating that one thing. And even though I'm Scottish by heritage and I love potatoes, it took my kids about 3 years after that incident before they'd even start eating mashed potatoes when we went out to eat. So you can get food fatigue real easy. Yeah. Oh, yes. On the other hand, I hate food waste. And if you have a bag of potatoes that's starting to soften, or they're, you know, out there, please go can them. Yes, can them, use them up. Just don't buy another bag of potatoes till you get them used up. You know, that's the thing. We wind up with these things on our shelves and we don't rotate our stock. So rotating your stock and having a good pantry is just as important. You know. Oh, watch those fingers. Hey, no fingers in the fan. All right. So it's always the boys. I love them, but my boys are the same way, you know. Yeah. But it's all good. So how am I coming on time? I want to make sure I get that. Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions while we're waiting for? This is always the worst time. So Here's the reason you don't start canning at 9 o'clock at night. Because you look at the recipe and it says, oh, 75 minutes in the canner. And you think, oh, okay, I'll be done in an hour and a half. No, because you have to figure in that time it takes to vent for 10 minutes. And it doesn't start venting right away. So you can always add another half hour. And that's why at midnight you're out there taking the cans that you started at 9 o'clock out of the canner, because you didn't take into the account that the time it takes the canner to cool off a little bit and all those other things. So that's my advice to new canners. Don't start projects late at night. It always takes longer than it says on that recipe. Any other questions on any part of canning? Isn't it wonderful? She says she started canning potatoes that she can find on sale. And you know, it's just wonderful to have these things on our shelf. People ask me, you know, is it economical to can? Well, it isn't necessarily always economical. I could go buy a can of canned, tinned tomatoes cheaper than I can can it myself. But is it going to taste as good? No, because food out of a can tastes different than food out of glass. Okay, if you put orange juice in a can, a tin can, I'm not going to drink it because I don't like that tinny taste to it. But I can can orange juice in glass, and it still tastes good to me. As far as the economical, I watch and I go to the local. I don't grow mushrooms. Well, I grow shiitakes, but I don't grow enough mushrooms to feed my family for a year. And so I go to the store and I look for the ones that are on clearance, and I buy those. Because I can pick up 1 or 2 packages of those and can it for the same price as one of those little tiny jars that I buy of mushrooms in the store. So this weight has a 5, 10, 15. I love these one-piece weights. They're always getting lost at my house. The number one piece of equipment that gets lost at my house is the weight for my canner. All right, see, it's already going. I can't see the weight. Am I at 5 pounds, or the dial? Am I at 5? Okay. Don't touch that, because that will literally burn you through to the bone. All right, so that's it. That was the time. Now it just has to sit until it's completely cool to the touch. So a lot of times, and this is the other thing, it goes against the guidelines. A lot of times you start, as soon as you're water bathing, you take your stuff out of the canner. Why do you do that? Does anybody know why you want to get it out and get it setting out on your counter and out of that water? It is better processing. There's this thing called flat sour. It's not one of those bacterias that's going to burst your jar open in the jar. It's a little sneaky. You'll open it and you'll taste it and you go, oh, that's not right. That's not right. If you start canning at 9 o'clock at night in your water bath canner and you leave it in there overnight in this kind of heat, you're just inviting that bacteria out of the air in there, and you're going to get, before those jars can seal down and keep that bacteria out of the air and the water out of them, you're going to get what they call flat sour. It's very unappetizing and it tastes awful. It's only happened to me a couple times, and of course both times it was when I had to leave it and go do something and didn't get it out right away because I thought I had time to do it and I didn't. And I started a project when I shouldn't have because I needed to get it done and tried to do too many things at once. And so you want to make it. But milk is an exception because we've pressure canned that air, and I'm going to leave that gauge right on that until it cools off. So I'm not really going to let air into my canner. I'm not sure that they're going to seal until we open that up later because of the heat in here today. This is not the ideal conditions to be canning today. As far as, yeah. It is turned off. Thank you, because the one side was not completely turned off. So this might caramelize a little bit more because I left it on a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull that over here to the trivet because I'm brave. Don't do this at home. Oh, I can't. Never mind, I can't because she took my other trivet for something. Just a minute, maybe I can. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Don't ever do that at home. Don't ever do that at home. All right. This is one of those things where I'm the mom. Do as I say, not as I do. That's not good form, but we need that burner, and we're trying to keep things going today. All right. No, you should always take them out of the water bath. Don't leave them sit for long periods in the water. You're just asking for it, and then all your hard work is down the drain, so to speak. Yeah. Oh, these you can take out hot. It's just that you want to let cool. Yeah. I don't understand. Oh, the milk you could let sit in the canner because it's in the pressure canner and you still have the gauge on. You're not getting the air in it. I'm talking about water bath canning. Flat sour is something more for water bath. So. If you're good, I would be an early riser. Yeah. I wouldn't let it set 12 hours, But four or five would be fine. 6 would be fine. So does anybody else have any questions? Yes. Yes. It's the exact same time. Exact same time, and it's the same change in pressure. Yeah. It pasteurizes it inside because we're bringing it to that 240 degree temperature. Yeah. I have never canned milk in quarts, so I can't talk to that. And I'm not going to tell you something I don't do. For me, pints have always been perfect. Even with a large family, my recipes, I don't like to drink this. Okay, because of the caramelized sugars in there, it alters the taste. So this is something I primarily use for baking. It's not, or in milk, in coffee, or in hot chocolate. If I'm making hot chocolate, I'm heating it up. I'm using a little bit less sugar. Don't tell my kids they think they're getting the same amount of sugar, but they're not. Because it tastes sweeter. I have I been desperate and put it in the refrigerator the night before because I knew they wanted it on their cereal? Yes. Do my kids drink it on their cereal? Yes. Again, it probably won't taste as good on something like Fruit Loops. It's a high sugar cereal because of the sugar content in the milk. But it would probably be pretty good on bran flakes, But that's not my first priority with canning this. My priority for canning it is to have it for baking, if you have your own cow, there's that period of time where you have to let them rest from being milked until they freshen with the next calf. And so you have that period of time where you don't have any milk. This is a good thing to do for that period of time, so that your cow gets a good rest before she freshens with the next calf. And you can still bake, you can still have, milk in your coffee, you can still have things, but you're not going to be like, hey, I want to grab that, and it's refreshing to chug 2 cups of that, My 15-year-old who'll drink a gallon of milk is not going to the refrigerator for a pint of my canned milk. It's just not quite the same. Is it still good? Yes. Is it really good for the purpose I'm using it? Yes. But it's not your fresh drinking milk. It's not, you know. Yes, it would be very good in an Alfredo sauce, but it'd be a little sweeter, or in a cream sauce. It'd be really good for making, sausage gravy in the morning. Very good for that. Yes, I know that. I have done that. It's very good in sausage gravy, but it makes it a little bit sweeter gravy than what you might be used to, but it's still very good over biscuits with a little, hamburger sausage or something. But I'm going to go ahead and give you guys about a 10-15 minute break. Sarah will be back at 3. So go ahead, go to the bathroom. Please get something to drink and get hydrated. It's really hot today. And then come back to see Sarah at 3. Thank you. No, I love questions, and I love people asking questions. It fills that time in.
I just had a quick question. We walked up, you were already halfway through everything, and then I seen a jug there. So was this canning store-bought milk or fresh milk?
You could do both.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
But
check.
if you do fresh milk, you want to really skim it, the cream out of it,
Cream.
because you want to use it for
To run it through to be separate.
it's going to, so like, skim milk is going to taste like 2%.
Gotcha.
2% is going to taste like, or like low fat can be like skim, or because there's that gradient off. And then store-bought milk, whole milk, is 4% milk. The rest water. You're paying a lot of money for water to buy store-bought milk. So store-bought milk isn't even like, the whole store-bought milk is going to taste more like your fresh milk from the cow.
Gotcha.
And then you're pasteurizing it. But milk breaks all the rules. It's an exception to all of those rules. So if you didn't hear the whole thing, take that.
I appreciate it.
There's lots of tricks to it.
Thank you.
But this was recorded. You can watch it again online. Yesterday and today. Superb. And this is what on your YouTube channel.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If you put these two things together, you're going to get a cheese problem. So you do not wipe your rims like you would with vinegar. You don't put a dash, and a lot of people have heard why they splash a dash of vinegar in their canner so that they don't have to wash their jars when it comes out of the canner because of their water quality. And so you don't want to put any vinegar in your canner, or wipe with any vinegar, or you're making cheese in that jar and you open it up and it's very disappointed.
I thought it was about making. I was like, I thought it was. Okay. I got confused. Thank you.
Because you don't want to make cheese. People put it in if they have really a lot of minerals in their water. They come out like, this is a jar of water I did yesterday. There's just a little bit of like some on it. People with hard water, a lot of minerals, they get that white calcium oil on the outside of their jar. And so to counteract that, they like to put vinegar or other products. I can't think of the name of the other ones that come up with oil. They put that in the canner to keep the jar clean. So they don't have to like the moss or so. she's watered back in bruschetta, and it needs to come out of there, but she's gone. No, I don't. No, some people do. I only teach you what I have personal experience doing and what works for me. So if I go up, if I don't do what the USDA has approved or tested, I'm only going to do something I have done myself. I know. So milk is an exception to every rule. Milk in this area, your 10 pounds of pressure, milk is only 5. Like if you were to can just, and I don't know why people do that, but they pressure can teachers and you want to they jump down to 5 instead of 10. Milk is like that. There's that rule where you go down to 5, and then there's absolutely no time. The time it takes, you bring it up to 5 pounds of pressure, and it starts to sway. You turn your canner off, and then the time is this time is cooking right now until I can put my hand on here and leave it until it's completely full. I don't take the weight off. I don't do anything with it. I just leave it, and I walk away for 4 hours, and I come back to it totally cool. And again, usually we talk about flat sour. Usually you don't want to do that. You want to get it as soon as it's cool enough to start moving it and get it out. You want to get it out. But because of it being this one, that's milk I canned yesterday. It was store milk, so it was very white still. It could come out a very beige color. Depends on what you feed your cattle. If they have a high molasses diet, the milk is going to be sweeter. It just really depends on what you're feeding, where they're getting.
What time is it? Ooh, I got 11 minutes.
You skim it. You want to get all the fat out. You want to make your butter. You can can butter. No, I've
heard people say yes and
So there is only one. Do you have a marker by chance or a pen?
He is shelf stable.
Oh, wait, I have a marker. Is a marker okay?
Just kind of cook it till it's almost.
Is this page
They don't
okay?
go quite that far.
And who would you like it made out to?
Butter, but you
Pam,
can
yeah,
can
yeah.
butter. Or make it shelf stable. It doesn't taste quite. Again, it's something you're going to bake with.
I'm not so good at
spread on your toast because once you take those milk solids out, you change the taste a little bit.
normally it's better, but I think the heat.
It's the best way I can use my brain to shut off. It does, and it's a little flatter. Maybe it would be really good in a whipped recipe, where you whip it and butter or something.
So the Instant Pot, there is one brand of Instant Pot that is what I have rated pressure canning. But water bath canning is fine. So water bath canning, you are submerged in jars full of water, so you leave the lid off anyways, and it just stays with water. It's a big old pot. Any big old pot will.
It still separates and has shake it.
Pressure canning, just the, I believe it's the XL.
You want to cook a lot of that
And it will
water
say
out.
on it, it
You
only
buy store-bought
rated for pressure.
store-bought
So make sure you check out your model, injected it, check out your water.
and most of them water. So you got like 99% oil it for a little bit and then to get the water out. Otherwise you get a real big
No,
separation.
now they do make electric pressure canners. But those are something. Really well.
oh yeah.
Totally two different products.
Yes.
And the electric pressure canners are for smaller batch canning. So
Okay.
those will be.
Yes.
I think they could be 4
These are safe crates for jars.
My mother gives you some.
Oh, thank you so much.
So here are some for you. There's pint.
She's like, I don't care if it's batch canning.
These are sites and here's a coupon code. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There's we ship them for free.
Get these out.
Enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you so much.
I just joined your group.
Hi.
Just wanted to give you those.
Do you have a
I've
pen?
seen those.
Just wanted to give you some.
I appreciate that, but I am on a. Oh, I'm on microphones.
If you like them.
I am flying.
Okay.
I can't get these. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Oh, I'll talk about it.
Yes, I will. Yep, give that to you. I don't think they're gonna let me on the plane. Just scan that code.
Okay.
Down there, but I know that you
a chance to walk around.
What was I doing?
Oh, yeah.
No, and this is my third year, and every time I try to walk around,
Yeah.
and I just can't.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to do it. So,
Thank
and
you.
I just joined your group, so thank you.
I just took. Oh, you did.
What
you
did I
take-
do? What did I do? What did I do?
I was grabbing this one. I don't know where it went, so you could put your jars on the back on it.
Oh, yeah, you're so smart.
I am. That's why you keep me around, Sarah. Because we make a great
You're
team.
always thinking. I'm always like Queen Chaos. Just can.
And there's one jar in here on its side. And
Oh,
one
how'd that happen?
probably didn't get the time because I didn't see it.
No, that's fine.
And I turned. Well, it might have got the time. Believe me, it was on for quite a while before I realized it was on. We'll watch that one.
Top right hand corner.
Okay.
Top right.
Top right. All right.
Queen Chaos. Do we have another one of these?
I gotta
Make
get
it
you a
so much
vase.
faster.
That was the only one I had. But here, wait. Hold on. Can I? Am I?
No, it's under there.
Okay. But yeah. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Got what you need? B-roll? Are you doing B-roll? We're giving away free spa facials today. If you would like to come back up, all the steam you can handle. Would you like it? I've got one coming up. Last one. Then I'm out of here. Nope. I've got 5 hours of filming tonight. Am I still in the Microsoft? I've got 5 hours of filming tonight with Lehman's. I'm sure tonight. My Airbnb. Do you know where the cuckoo clock is? And it's like right in that little neighborhood. Yeah, it's just a house. Cute little house. Huh? Oh yeah. And it was like the same price as a hotel. So I've got a kitchen. That's good.
Oh, darn it. I just took my book out to the seat.
Oh no!
I figured you would have time to sell it.
Oh no! How far is the cheese?
Oh.
Found the other one.
You did?
So weird.
Yeah.
What did you say? Oh no! I said you find it.
No, I got one from Logan. Because you're going to need it, and I'm not done with mine. I don't know. It walked away. I don't know. There you go, girl. You got all your jars?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I actually might need a couple more because I want to do the rest of this chicken so it doesn't go back in the fridge.
There's more chicken in the fridge that you cut up yesterday.
Here's the problem. As soon
And
as
there's
I'm
a whole nother bag after that. I'll take it home with me. Yeah.
biting me.
Will it bother you if I do the dishes?
No, not at all. Flies. And then you can't even get them off. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
You have all your lids. Oh, weird. Okay, that's what it is. I'm like, I'm sure.
How many do you need?
I need two.
9, 10. I'm going to get another box. Because if I drop one.
After Sarah, I'm going to do the spice cider. But yesterday we ran over time, so I'm trying to do as much prep work as I can so that you guys don't have to, sit here till 4:30 like it ran yesterday. So I'm trying to have it all ready to go so I can just talk about it and it'll be boom, done. Kind of, sort of, not really. In my imaginary world in my head.
Sure. Oh, how fun. Oh, perfect. I love that. Yeah, sure. I'll be done right here. I'm trying to finish right on time at 4 o'clock. So yeah, right after that. And if oh, I love that. How old is she? 11. Beautiful. I love that. Time check. I don't have a phone on. What time is it? Do you have a time? 3:01. All right, 3:01. Let's start. Hello. We're going to get started so I can get you guys going on time, hopefully, and be able to have enough time to answer all of your questions. So my name is Sarah. Was anybody here for the water bath canning? Couple of people? All right. So my name is Sarah. Just a quick introduction. I've been canning for a really, really long time. I'm a third generation canner. We have recipes that go back like to the 1800s in my family, so I know we've been doing this a really long time. And this is just kind of a lifestyle that we live. We live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We have 5 children, my husband and I, and a grandbaby. And so we do a lot of gardening and canning and homesteading and raising our own meat and all of the things that you can learn how to do here. Canning's really important to us because we have a very short grow season up there. We still had frost about 3 days ago. So, yes, plants have to go in ASAP as soon as I get home. We have about 120 to 130 grow days a year, so everything we have to do, we have to mass do it very, very quickly. We have to pull in all the food very quickly and can and preserve everything very quickly because we only live to prepare for winter. That's all we do up there. It's just one long winter. But we love it. It's beautiful up there. If you've never been to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I suggest you go. It is truly God's country up there. So today we're going to do what I call Pressure Canning 101, and we're also going to be making a recipe from my canning book, and that's going to be the pork carnita recipe, but we're going to do this with chicken. And the reason I chose chicken instead of the pork was because I wanted to highlight that the recipes in this book, you guys can tailor to your own needs. So you can add beef, you can add chicken, you can do this with pork products, and you can really tailor this to what your family likes to eat. And most canning recipes are like that. So if you have your book on you, we are going to start on page, pork carnitas, page 204. And the way that I wrote the recipes for the canning book is that they're written in a way so you can mass produce them. So what I mean by that is everything is per jar. So everything is either per pint or per quart. If it's per pint, it will say double the recipe. And what that means is you can tailor this whether you have 20 pounds of pork or 200 pounds of pork. So you can add all of your spices and your ingredients per jar. And I did that because myself as a canner, when I look at a recipe, I don't want to go, well, how many jars is that going to make? And I need to times that times 20, and then how many tablespoons are in a cup? And so I laid this out in a way that you can mass produce or do smaller batches. Yeah? We're on page 204. 204. So who in here pressure cans anything already? Few of you do. And who has never pressure canned before? Yay. So the goal here today is to arm you with the tools that you need to go home and feel secure in pressure canning, and to help answer your questions if you're already a pressure canner. Any questions that you may have about either the pressure canners or your jars or issues that you're running into, I really want to make sure that you leave here feeling confident today. If you do not, I have not done my job, for sure. So, is there anybody at home that has a canner in the box that's never used it?
I have a brand new All-American one that I bought that I have not used yet that I'm scared of.
Because you're terrified of it. Are you a Presto user? You've used Prestos all your life?
And I'm scared, no, not all my life.
Okay.
For the last couple of years. And I'm still terrified of it too.
Okay.
So I stay back away from it. I won't go in the kitchen while it's processing.
And that's a totally normal fear. So I want you to know, and anybody out there that's watching, that one of the things I hear most often is, I'm scared. I'm terrified. I don't want to use the pressure canner. And I understand why. We're also really scared when we first learn how to drive a car, right? We can't look in our rearview mirror. We can't turn our head to see if anybody's coming in our periphery because we are laser locked on driving in between the lines and not going over the speed limit. And how much do we do now? Like, we're 5 miles over, we're, looking all around us all the time, we've got the radio going, maybe the kids are arguing in the back seat, and none of those things really affect us. We put it on autopilot and we go. And canning is the same way. You're using a new piece of equipment. It's okay to be intimidated by it. That's okay, but you are in control of it, just like you are in control of the car. So if at any time the pressure canner is scaring you, if steam is maybe escaping and you don't know why, or it's making a whistling noise, or something just seems a little bit off, you're in complete control. If your car is skidding, what do we tell new drivers to do? If it's like skidding on the ice, maybe you guys don't have as much ice as we do, but if it's skidding on the snow, or do we tell them to lay on the gas? No. Take your foot off the gas, right? And it's the same thing with the pressure canner. If anything about that is scaring you and it doesn't seem right, turn off the heat. That's it. You kill the power to the thing. It has to have a heat source in order for it to work. So if at any point you're afraid, take away its power, take away its heat. We're going to go over the anatomy of the pressure canner and just the different pieces of it, and then we're going to talk about different foods that you can use in the pressure canner that you can put on your shelves. All right, so the anatomy of a pressure canner. It's two major components to the pressure canner, the pot and the lid. The pot is the base part right here. That is only filled with a couple of inches of water, not much. If you do any type of water bath canning, you know that you have to fill that all the way up with water and submerge the jars, not with these. So with these, what we're using is steam pressure, steam heat. So we just need enough water to fill up the canner with steam and create pressure on the inside. So if you were to ask me what my favorite type of canning is, hands down, it's pressure canning. It's a time saver, it's faster, it opens a whole world of foods that I can put on my shelves that water bath canning typically cannot. The other piece that goes inside of the canner is called the trivet or the tray. That's this piece right here. And your All-American canners come with two of these. Two. One goes on the bottom, and that's for your jars to sit on top of. And then you have a second one as a shelf. And that shelf means that you can double stack your jars. Another reason I love pressure canning. I can get double the amount load done in less time and have more jars on my shelf. So all the magic in a pressure canner happens basically with this piece. So this is your lid, and this is also going to be your pressure regulator. This is how the pressure is regulated. So you've got your handle, pretty self-explanatory. It's got some bayonet fingers underneath the lip of the lid. And what this does is it securely locks the bottom of the canner to the top of the canner. You're going to have a vent pipe, and this is how the steam is regulated. So when that vent pipe is open, the steam can come out. The pressure canner will not be under any type of intense pressure because the steam can flow out easily. And when you add your weight, yes, we do call this a weight, 5, 10, and 15. No, it does not weigh 5, 10, and 15 pounds. It's talking about PSI, 5, 10, and 15 PSI. When you add the weight to the vent pipe, it blocks it. And what happens when you block steam? It builds pressure. Dun, da, da, da. Pressure canning. Super simple, right? And that's all we're going to do. We're going to regulate using this weight. The All-American canners are self-regulating. So all you have to do is turn the fire up, find the sweet spot when you get the correct pressure, and then sit and wait. This is actually going to jiggle side to side. If you have a Presto, you know it jiggles all the time. The All-Americans are so good at regulating pressure, this will only jiggle 1 to 2 times every minute. So it's really efficient at holding its own pressure and regulating pressure. And that goes on the vent pipe. The other thing you have here is a dial gauge. The All-American canners have these. Some of the other brands do not. This is a visual representation of what's going on inside the canner. Just visual. This can be off by +2 and -2, so we always tell everybody, don't rely on this like it's biblical. You rely on the weight is biblical, because it actually takes pressure to make that weight move. Where a dial gauge, you could knock this, it could get some water condensation in it, anything could make it off just a little bit. But it's a good indicator of what's going on inside when it's working properly. You should have these tested every couple of years, depending on how much you're canning. Your local extension office can do that for you. Or what I do, because I'm lazy, and I don't want to make an appointment with the extension office, and I don't want to take time out of my day to go drive it there and get it tested, I just order a new one. So every couple of years, I order a new one. They're under $20. It comes directly to my house, and I'm like, boom, I screw it on. I'm ready to go again. And that's the basic components to the lid. Any questions on that? Those two pieces? Yes?
So you said 5, 10, 15. Does that thing have different holes that you put it on?
Correct.
You have different weights.
Nope. One weight for this. If you have a Presto and a Miro,
The other one is just, it's a tray.
yeah, so there's different types of weights for sure, and I could not go over all of them, but there's something called a dead weight. That's a 15-pound weight, and that's all it will ever be is 15 pounds. And so it just has one hole. It's 15 pounds. You either can everything at 15 or you have to sit and babysit the dial gauge because it will never jiggle. But the All-American has a 3-in-1 weight. And so there's 3 holes on this, a 5, a 10, and a 15, and each one of those is marked. Great question. Yeah, no, it's a good, curious question. That's why you're here. All right, so those are the pieces of the pressure canner.
And the All-American has no gaskets.
No what?
Gaskets, rubber gaskets.
No, no rubber gaskets. So no replaceable. I mean, you don't need to replace the rubber gasket.
How do I know how tight
It was a balloon pop.
how do I know how tight
Yep, we're going to get there when we run the canner, for sure, and I'll come back to that. Let's see what else you need to know about the canner. Oil the rim the first time you use it, and I don't care what kind of canner you're using, All-American or another brand, you need to make sure that you read the manual front to back a couple of times. Make sure you understand how your canner works. When you go to can something for the very first time, my suggestion to anybody that's new, can jars of water. Can jars of water. You're not going to lose anything if you pop a lid or it doesn't get processed correctly, or it takes the pressure off of you and the pressure of possibly losing your food if you just can some jars of water. And just keep doing that till you get comfortable. Once you're comfortable, go ahead and move over to food. Now, that brings us to food. What kinds of food can we use in a pressure canner? What types of food? Anybody have any ideas? All right, so we know in water bath canning we can do fruits, jams, jellies, fruit juices, pickles, chutneys, tomatoes, tomato products. I could go on and on. Everything else. So pressure canning is just like basically everything else. It's all your vegetables that you don't want to pickle. Maybe you just want carrots on your shelf. Maybe you just want green beans on your shelf. Maybe you don't want things in a pickling brine. It's all your vegetables. It's also all of your beans, all of your combo foods, soups, chilies, all of your meat, pork, chicken, help me out, beef, fish, game. Any hunters? Have you had canned venison before? Oh, tell me you've had canned venison. It is my absolute favorite of all the game meats to can is venison. It just hits so different. Venison is really delicious, but you can do all of them. And in here, I have the charts for those. I've got bear in here, elk, moose, just depending on what part of the country you're living in, and then also all your fish. So there's a lot that you can do in pressure canning that is much harder to achieve with the water bath canner. It's also why I prefer it. It just gives me more options for what to make for dinner. I grab a jar off the shelf, it's already cooked. I make something out of it, and everybody's fed within 10 to 15 minutes. So it's a time saver. So those are the foods. We're going to do the pork carnitas. So what I've pre-filled here, if you've got your book, I have pre-filled ingredients per pint jar. That is the cumin, half a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of salt, 1 bay leaf, a fourth a teaspoon of onion powder, a fourth a teaspoon of garlic powder, and a half a teaspoon of orange juice concentrate. So that's what we got going on in these jars. I'm going to do one just to show you. All right, let's talk about spices and pressure canning. So when you are pressure canning any new recipe, I always suggest starting light on the spices. Does anybody know what happens to the spices when you're pressure canning? If you were here earlier, you do. Say it louder. They get stronger. They get stronger. And what happens is when you're pressure canning, the food on a cellular level is pressurized. And anytime you